Picture this, a 15-year-old boy, barefoot, shaking so hard his teeth are rattling. He was dragged from his village at gunpoint less than 6 hours ago, and now he stands in a circle of masked men in the middle of nowhere. The only light comes from a blood-red moon hanging over the Jalisco highlands, like an open wound in the sky. His initiation into the cartel isn't quick, it isn't painless, and it isn't optional. They shove him to his knees. His best friend, the kid he grew up playing soccer with, is dragged out in front of him. What they force this boy to do next, I cannot describe on this platform, but I will tell you this much. If he refused, he didn't leave that circle alive. Nobody refused twice. The things that happened in those initiation rituals would be flagged as too extreme, even on the dark web. This isn't speculation. This is another Tuesday night in the training camps of El Mencho's empire. And just 3 days ago, February 22nd, 2026, Mexican Special Forces finally caught up with the man behind all of it. Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes, the most wanted drug lord on the planet, the $30 million ghost. Shot and finished in a farmhouse in Tapalpa, Jalisco. But the second the news broke, his followers didn't mourn. They retaliated. Highways across 4 Mexican states were blocked with burning vehicles. Passenger buses were set ablaze, some with passengers still trapped inside. Entire towns went into lockdown. Stores shuttered. Streets emptied. Sirens everywhere and nowhere at once. The head of the snake is gone, but the body is thrashing harder and more violently than ever before. Welcome to the most disturbing deep dive you will find anywhere on this platform. If the Epstein files showed you what the powerful do behind closed doors, this is what unchecked, unregulated evil does in the open streets of Mexico, and increasingly, in your own neighborhood. Over the next 20 minutes, we are going to walk through every layer of this nightmare. The man's rise from a dirt-poor avocado farmer to the most feared cartel kingpin in modern history, the unspeakable cruelty that became his organization's signature, the fentanyl pipeline that has quietly taken more American lives than every US war since Vietnam combined, the corruption so deep that it didn't just infect the government, it became the government, and finally, the fresh wave of violence that is erupting across Mexico right now, in real time, as his empire fractures and his lieutenants claw at each other for the throne. Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes was born in 1966 in the remote, sun-scorched village of Aguililla, Michoacan. This is deep avocado country, the kind of place where running water is a luxury, and kids rarely make it past 6th grade because the cartels start recruiting before puberty even hits. There's nothing romantic about poverty here. It's just dust, hunger, and the constant pull of the only industry that pays, organized crime. As a teenager, Nemesio crossed the US border and landed in San Francisco. He didn't come looking for the American dream. He came looking for a hustle. He found one fast, selling heroin on the streets of the Tenderloin, one of the roughest neighborhoods in the country. He got arrested, got deported, came back, got arrested again, got deported again, and then he did something nobody expected. He went home to Jalisco and somehow got himself a state police uniform. For a few brief months, Nemesio Oseguera was technically a law enforcement officer. Let that sink in. The man who would go on to become the most brutal drug lord in Mexican history once carried a badge. He used that time to learn how the system worked from the inside, who could be bought, who could be threatened, and who needed to disappear. Then he dropped the badge and joined the Milenio cartel as a low-level enforcer. He was patient, calculating, ruthless in a way that even other cartel members found unsettling. By 2010, after systematically eliminating or betraying every boss above him, one by one, year after year, he carved out his own organization from the still warm wreckage of his former allies, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known by its Spanish acronym, CJNG. He didn't build a business. He didn't build a gang. He built a machine of pure terror that would eventually stretch across 5 continents, and his founding rule was brutally simple. Fear is the only currency that never loses its value. Under El Mencho, CJNG transformed parts of Mexico into the most dangerous territory on the face of the earth, worse than active war zones, worse than failed states. This wasn't just drug trafficking anymore. This was industrial-scale human cruelty operating in broad daylight. Victims, men, women, elderly, even children, were taken from their homes, snatched off buses, kidnapped from marketplaces, and transported to secret compounds hidden deep in the Jalisco countryside, ranches with names like Oseguera in Tochitlan, places that investigators would later describe using a comparison so devastating I almost didn't include it in this script. They called them Mexico's own concentration camps. What happened inside those walls is something survivors speak about only in fragments. Broken sentences, long silences, shaking hands. Federal investigators who raided these sites found industrial ovens, chemical dissolution vats large enough to fit multiple people, mountains of personal belongings, wallets, jewelry, children's shoes, belonging to people who simply vanished, hundreds of them, possibly thousands, entire families erased with no trace and no closure for anyone left behind. The cartel had a casual, almost playful nickname for their chemical disposal method. I won't repeat it here, but the fact that they joked about it tells you everything you need to know about the level of dehumanization at work. And then there were the so-called training camps. These were not military academies. They were psychological destruction facilities. Recruits, most of them teenagers, some as young as 13, grabbed off the street or sold by their own desperate families, were subjected to initiation rituals so savage, so psychologically devastating, that the ones who survived came out the other side as fundamentally different human beings, broken, hollow, completely desensitized to suffering. The cartel didn't want soldiers. It wanted people who could do unspeakable things without flinching, and it manufactured them by the hundreds. If you failed the initiation, you became the next demonstration. And trust me when I say, you do not want to know what demonstration meant inside those walls. Mexican prosecutors do know, and several of them have needed therapy after reviewing the evidence. El Mencho didn't just traffic traditional narcotics. Cocaine and heroin were the old playbook. He saw something far more profitable, far more devastating, and far more difficult to stop. He weaponized fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so potent that a dose the size of a few grains of sand can stop a grown man's lungs from working. His super labs, massive, sophisticated operations hidden in the mountains of Michoacan and Jalisco, pumped out staggering quantities of the substance every single week. They pressed it into counterfeit prescription pills, fake OxyContin, fake Percocet, fake Xanax, pills that were virtually indistinguishable from the real thing. A teenager buys what they think is a painkiller at a party, one pill. That's all it takes. They never wake up. And this wasn't small scale. At its peak, CJNG's fentanyl supply chain was contributing to over 100,000 American overdose deaths per year. Read that number again, 100,000 per year. That is a body count that exceeds all United States combat fatalities since the end of World War II. Every war, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of them combined, and fentanyl still has a higher number. Let that truly sink in. Entire communities across America have been hollowed out by this poison. Small towns in Ohio, West Virginia, and Tennessee that used to have Little League games on Saturday mornings now have more funeral homes than grocery stores. Teenagers gone overnight, parents burying children, babies born physically dependent on opioids, trembling in hospital incubators before they've even opened their eyes. Families destroyed not by a conscious decision to use hard drugs, but by a single pill that looked exactly like medicine. And while America was drowning, while first responders were carrying Narcan like it was a second wallet, El Mencho was reinvesting the profits into more labs, more supply routes, more weapons, more surveillance drones, and more power. He wasn't running a drug operation. He was running a war disguised as a business, and America was losing. Here's the question that haunts every investigator who ever worked this case. How did one man, one single human being with a $30 million bounty on his head, wanted by every major law enforcement agency on the planet, evade capture for over a decade? The answer is simple and devastating, because he didn't just bribe the system, he owned it. Governors in multiple Mexican states accepted his money and looked the other way. Federal judges took his orders and let his people walk free. Police chiefs carried cartel loyalty marks hidden beneath their uniforms. Entire military units, soldiers who were supposed to be hunting him, reportedly operated as his personal escort and protection detail instead. The very people Mexico trusted to fight the cartels were, in many cases, working for the cartels. Mayors and local officials who refused to pay the cartel's monthly quota, their protection fee, were made into very public examples. I don't need to detail what that means. Use your imagination. Journalists who attempted to investigate or expose the cartel's operations simply disappeared permanently. The cartel didn't hide in the shadows of the government. In many regions of Mexico, it replaced the government entirely. Towns flew CJNG banners from public buildings like national flags. Local businesses paid taxes to the cartel, not to the state. In some communities, children grew up singing Narco corridos, folk songs that glorified El Mencho as a Robin Hood figure, a protector of the poor. The propaganda was so effective that entire generations believed the cartel was more trustworthy than the government. Mexico didn't just have a drug problem. Mexico had a narco state problem, and the narco state had a name, a logo, and a CEO, CJNG. Then came February 22nd, 2026, the day the devil's luck ran out. US intelligence, reportedly a combination of DEA surveillance, intercepted communications, and at least one high-level informant inside the cartel's inner circle, finally provided Mexican authorities with the precise location of El Mencho's latest safe house, a remote property in the highlands of Tapalpa, Jalisco. Mexican special forces moved in hard and fast. The details of the operation are still emerging, but what we know is this: Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, age 59, the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere, was brought down in a hail of gunfire. The man who had commanded an army of thousands, who had amassed billions of dollars, who had terrorized an entire nation for over a decade, he bled out on a dirt floor like any other mortal. Official reports suggest he was ultimately tracked through a personal connection, someone close to him who either talked or was turned by intelligence agencies. The exact details remain classified, but whatever satisfaction that moment brought, it lasted approximately 45 minutes, because the moment the news hit the streets, CJNG's regional commanders responded with immediate, coordinated, and terrifying retaliation. Highways across Jalisco, Michoacan, Colima, and Guerrero turned into rivers of fire. Vehicles were torched and used as roadblocks. Passenger buses were attacked. Some set alight with people still on board. Rival cartel figures were targeted in their homes. The power vacuum didn't slowly form. It detonated. His sons, nephews, and top lieutenants are now openly turning on each other, each faction trying to prove it is more ruthless, more willing to escalate, more deserving of the throne. And civilians are caught in the middle of every single one of those power plays. This isn't the end of the story. Every expert, every analyst, every law enforcement official I've spoken to says the same thing. This is the beginning of something potentially worse, because the infrastructure El Mencho built didn't die with him. The super labs in the mountains are still operational. The tunnels beneath the US-Mexico border, some of them sophisticated enough to have rail systems, electricity, and ventilation, are still open. The supply chains that move product from Jalisco to Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and beyond are still fully intact. The billions in cartel money still flowing through legitimate businesses, real estate, and offshore accounts haven't been seized. New leaders are already emerging from the wreckage, younger, more tech-savvy, more media-aware, and in many cases, even less restrained than El Mencho was, because at least El Mencho had a strategy, a cold, calculated logic behind his cruelty. The next generation may not even have that. The fentanyl continues to flow north, the bodies continue to pile up south, and far too many powerful people on both sides of the border continue to look the other way, because the money is too good, the fear is too deep, and the problem is too big for any one government to solve alone. El Mencho is gone, but the machine he spent 15 years building is still running, still producing, still destroying lives on an industrial scale. Mexico is bleeding out in real time, caught between warring factions that have no interest in peace and no incentive to stop. America is quietly losing an entire generation to a synthetic poison that arrives disguised as medicine, and the rest of the world is doing what it always does with problems that don't have easy answers, pretending it's someone else's responsibility. If you watch this entire video, you now carry something that most people actively avoid: awareness. If this opened your eyes, or if it confirmed something you already suspected, hit that like button. It's not about vanity. It genuinely changes whether the algorithm shows this to 10 people or 10,000. And this is a story that people need to see, because the follow-up to this story is going to be just as critical. The cartel war isn't over. It's entering a new and potentially more dangerous chapter. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read them. Let's have a real conversation about what's happening, because silence is exactly what allows this to continue.